large-scale introduction of genetic engineering insinuate towards the future of mankind?
In terms of science, CRISPR, the main gene editing technology, isn't technologically advanced enough for safe human tests or operations, but would certainly benefit from seeing future research and development. So the main problem that lies within CRISPR, as said by University of Missouri Health, is that different viruses are needed to infect different cells. And as this image shows in the orange, each virus has a ligand which binds to the purple receptor on the cell. And since different cells have different receptors, different viruses are needed to be used. So what this means is that if we want to infect heart cells and the wrong virus is used, it'll go to the wrong part of the body and cause significant damage or mutations. There have also been real-world setbacks. Take Jesse Gelsinger, for example, who sadly passed away 3 days after receiving genetic testing. And this could have been because of allergic reaction-like symptoms. His body became inflamed, and this is in response to the vector, because his immune system was overreactive, which just shows how mandated and looked into these tests need to be by government institutions. But despite this, scientists are working towards perfecting the CRISPR system because of the applications being so beneficial. Take this chart, for example. Out of the top 10 causes of death in the United States, heart disease, cancer, respiratory infection, Alzheimer's, diabetes, and nephritis are all genetic. So if we could cure some or even one of these, we'd be saving hundreds of thousands of lives. On top of this, we can save babies before they're even born. With this chart on the right, it shows that most women in Western Australia choose, after a PGD screening or after they find that their child has autism or Down syndrome, they choose to abort their baby. And if we could cure Down syndrome, we'd be not only bettering the lives of these families, but preventing false abortions, which is when a mother doesn't go into a second test and aborts a healthy baby by mistake. The only limitation to this is that this is severely far out of the reach of what CRISPR can do currently. So how can scientists find a kind of middle ground between the current setbacks and what they're looking towards achieving? Well, in this image, it shows a single cell mutation, which is when one building block of the DNA is swapped out for another. So scientists can focus on this, since this is what CRISPR is currently best at. And if we stick within the confines of our technology, we won't be causing unintentional accidents or death. And the only limitation to this is that this is severely restricting our range of knowledge. But even so, if we can perfect this, we can possibly apply it to other areas. On top of this, the government can provide benefits for meeting clinical utility, which is essentially when a test kit is guaranteed to be useful and teach us things. So say the test kit maker makes a guaranteed to be useful test kit and they sell it to the buyer, well, the government can give some of the money to them, or extra money. And this will make it so that no money is being wasted out of taxpayer dollars or government money.
And on the political side of genetic modification, as seen from this map right here, many countries already have bans or restrictive rules against genetic modification. And here in Europe, many countries have it banned completely, but the European Union recently has been talking about allowing genetic modification for medical purposes only, as Jack brought up the reasons why it should be allowed. And with the US versus China case, a scientist in China recently started using genetic modification on human embryos, which the government is looking like they're supporting and not really putting end to it, even though it's outlawed in China at the moment. So between the US and China, a possible gene race could happen where we could make the better humans, as Connor will go into more and is ethical. And the middle ground possibly would be the medical purposes only, which could solve the issue about it. And then some laws limiting genetic modification right now are the laws of biomedicine, the Convention of Human Rights, and the Binding Council of Europe Treaty. And with the Binding Council of Europe Treaty, they have parts in it where they talk about allowing genetic modification for medical purposes only, but these other two laws are completely limiting it from later in the solutions.
So, ethically speaking, the technology isn't advanced enough, and once it is advanced enough, it should be used for medical purposes only, and not for things like hair color, eye color, or other phenotypes of that nature. However, according to Julian Savulescu, a practical ethicist at Oxford, parents may one day be morally obligated to using the technology because it can improve the longevity or quality of life in their children, similar to the way they're morally obligated to using vaccines now. The Northfield Council on Bioethics has expressed it's a group of bioethicists, has expressed their support for the technology and its advancement, saying that they understand that it'll have good medical purposes in the future. However, Marcy Darnowski, another bioethicist, has openly disagreed with their stance, and therefore ours, by saying that if it's used for medical purposes, it will be used unnecessarily and unethically for physical traits. And despite the fact that she disagrees with us, she highlights a really important part of our claim, which is that if used for physical traits, it'll have serious ethical issues and can cause some serious problems, such as, like Tanner was saying, an international race for who can create the best genetic makeup for their population, and a societal gap where rich people can afford it and poor people cannot, which Alex will elaborate on further in the Gattaca concept. And then finally, there's ethical issues in how the research is conducted now. The emerging consensus among scientists and ethicists is that to keep the human germline safe, gene editing must not be conducted on human embryos that are meant to be used for reproduction. That's according to Brandon Fott, a writer and editor for the New Atlantis. And what this means is that researchers and the ethicists working with these researchers currently believe that the best way to conduct research is the embryos that have been tested need to be destroyed after testing. Because if they were to enter the germline, then that means the mother is giving birth to a child from that embryo, and that can have some serious problems since they're not exactly sure what they're doing to the embryo. And then a major opposition to this is that the embryos then aren't able to become a person, similar to anti-abortion ideology. And then, of course, the major argument is that you just shouldn't conduct research that way. And but the issue with that is if you're not conducting the research that way, you're not really conducting the research at all. If you're not conducting the research for a technology that can save as many lives as this, then that's the most unethical option. Of course, this is all a current matter, so now we can talk about futuristic with Alex.
Piggybacking off of what Connor said about the Gattaca concept, gene editing outside of correcting some error in the DNA leads to many impacts in the future. Taking the movie Gattaca, for example, it's based about how the rich, wealthy people were able to afford to make their babies a master race above the poor people, and that leads to, of course, a whole plot line of a movie that actually did pretty good. And also, that impacts how our descendants are, our children's children, and so on and so forth, and the environment, because there's no telling what could happen if we change a gene and how that will affect our kids. Will it give them defects or something like that? And also with the environment, when you change a gene a certain way, it could decrease the genetic variation, which means that there's an increase of a possibility of a large-scale epidemic that could kill thousands. Also, if you look at this graph, this is the lifespan of people with cystic fibrosis from 1990 to 2010. That's a 70% increase, but with the use of CRISPR, we could bring that all the way up to the average human lifespan of about 83 years old. Therefore, gene editing should only be limited to small edits and body cell only, as of now, until it's fully researched.
So, if we're only focusing on body cells and single-cell mutations and medical uses, how can parents who are both affected by genetic diseases give birth to healthy offspring 100% of the time? Well, a temporary solution to this is in vitro fertilization, and this means the mom and dad, the egg and sperm, are combined outside of their body in a lab dish, and out of that set of embryos, a healthy one is chosen with no genetic defects and then inserted back into the mother. And this causes no genetic changes that could enter the germline and cause future damage.
However, there will always be ethical issues with this, but with this solution, the least amount of people will be oppositional to it, and it'll save the most lives.
And with the consensus on laws, as the laws that I mentioned before limiting genetic modification, we would have to change those or rewrite them completely to allow genetic modification with like the Binding Council of Europe Treaty, and we would also have to get 40 countries who agree with those laws right now to change their stance to allow it. And the only way we would possibly be able to do this is if we got this technique perfectly right.
So if we perfect the technique and do medical uses only, getting the countries to have a consensus, how can we speed up our current research so that we can apply it to more things in the future? Well, the government should mandate, not just provide benefits, for something called analytical validity. And as this little pyramid shows, analytical validity is like the accuracy of the test. So tests have to be accurate before they're used. That's just safety. And so if there's no deaths, it won't set back the system. Paired with clinical utility, not only is it accurate, but it's useful.
Once all of these are put into place, there will be a domino effect of saving lives and improving future lives.
Well said.
Okay, a couple of questions for you. Alex, I'm going to start with you. In the future, what change would you make to your group norms, and how would you expect that to improve the team presentation?
I would most likely say probably meet more outside of class. We did do some meeting, like one time we met at McDonald's, but I feel like we could have really secured a more like understanding of each other. Like we understand each other's lenses, but if we met outside more, I feel like we might have understood them better.
Okay, Tanner. What is an example of a compelling argument from one of your peers' individual reports that you decided to exclude from your team presentation and why?
With Alex's argument with the descendants, we decided to only incorporate that small piece, but we decided to exclude the big majority of it with ending all of the genome and how it could cause like social Darwinism and all of that natural selection to fail. And we decided to exclude that because it didn't fit with our solution as best as it could. And since it would edit the genomes to be like matching perfectly, and we wanted it for medical purposes only, then that wouldn't correspond well.
I'm going to go to you, Connor. What do you think was the strongest counter argument, to the solution or conclusion your team identified, and why?
Broadly, it's probably just that it sounds silly, but that you shouldn't do it mainly for ethical reasons. That sounds dumb, but that's literally the most precise solution that there is. People have ethical issues with it because when you hear about how you can change the eye color or hair color of a baby before it's born, that's scary to people, especially if you have religious values. So yeah, that's definitely the biggest counter argument.
Okay, and then finally, Jack, if you would tell me how the content of the team presentation was changed as a result of group discussion.
That's a lot. So, when I learned about Connor's thing, how some people find it negative to destroy the embryos, that kind of went against my in vitro because, of course, some are destroyed, only one healthy one is chosen. But when we came together to talk about it, we thought, oh, well, it'll be saving the most lives in the end, and people will always have ethical problems with stuff, so we can do that. And then when I was talking with Alex about it, he was talking about how people need to be willing to support it for it to continue. And so I was thinking, well, how can we get people to support it? So I thought about making mandatory clinical utility, which of course is like the usefulness. So taxpayers won't be wasting their money, but if it's mandatory, then the test kit makers might lose their money or quit because not everyone's going to use it for completely useful purposes. So I changed that to beneficial, and then it just won perfectly.
Good.